In Argentina, citizens in Buenos Aires go to the polls in a high-stakes provincial election that has been widely regarded as a political barometer for the nation. In the United States, thousands of people gather in Washington, D.C. to protest against the Trump administration's military occupation of the U.S. Capitol, as well as the systematic harassment of immigrants by Immigration and Customs Enforcement. And in the Gaza Strip, at least 20,000 children have lost their lives at the hands of Israel since October 2023. Hello, welcome from the South. I'm Luis Alberto Matos from the teleSUR studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. In Argentina, over 14 million citizens in Buenos Aires go to the polls in a high-stakes electoral process that has been widely regarded as a political barometer for the nation. The two main political forces go head-to-head in these elections: the far-right alliance, Liberty Advances, and the Peronist coalition, Fuerza Patria. Voters will decide on 46 principal deputies, 18 alternates, 23 principal senators, 15 alternates, as well as municipal councilors and school board members across the province's 135 municipalities. The election takes place amid a deepening political and economic crisis at the federal level, marked by skyrocketing inflation, rising unemployment, and corruption scandals that have tarnished the image of Milei's administration. And Argentine people say goodbye to the grandmother of Plaza de Mayo, Rosa Tarlovsky de Roisenblit, at the age of 106 years old, with an enormous work and career as a human rights referent in the country and the world. Rosa Roisenblit was one of the founders of Grandmothers of Plaza de Mayo and central figure in the struggle for the identification of the children kidnapped or born in captivity during the last Argentine civil military dictatorship. Rosita, as she was also known, was born on August 15, 1999, in Moisesville, province of Santa Fe. Her daughter Patricia was one of the 30,000 people kidnapped by the dictatorship that lasted between 1976 and 1982, while Rosa's daughter was never found. The child she birthed in captivity, Guillermo, was found in 2000. The grandmother of Plaza de Mayo declared Rosa Rosenblit as its honorary president. Also in Argentina, the Ministry of Human Capital acknowledged that the audit Milei's government claimed to have carried out to justify the cessation of food assistance to soup kitchens does not exist. It occurred after a request for access to public information filed by the National Deputy for Buenos Aires, Natalia Saracho, on May 16, 2024. This request came one day after the head of cabinet, Nicolás Posse, announced in Congress that nearly 50% of the soup kitchens were non-existent based on alleged audit. The Ministry of Human Capital admitted that the audit turns out to be non-existent. Claims based on the alleged audit served to suspend the supply of provisions to the soup kitchens, leaving millions of kilos of food undistributed, many on the verge of expiration. Chileans will make a pilgrimage to pay homage to the victims of the coup d'etat against President Salvador Allende in 1973, which started the dictatorship of Augusto Pinochet for 17 years. The route will pass through Plaza de los Héroes, the Palacio de Moneda, and will culminate at the General Cemetery of the capital. On September 11th, commemorative acts, conferences, evenings, concerts, and visits to historical sites will take place with the objective of strengthening and maintaining the historical memory of these events. During the Pinochet dictatorship, more than 40,000 crimes against humanity were committed, among them kidnappings, detention, tortures, murders, and disappearances, all executed by the Carabineros and their collaborators under the command of Augusto Pinochet. And in Honduras, the left-wing Liberty and Refoundation Party, Libre, launched a massive rally on Saturday in the municipality of Trojes in El Paraíso to support the party's presidential candidate, Rizzi Moncada, for the upcoming November 30th general elections. During the act, Moncada reiterated her proposal of universal scholarships and job availability for the youth, as well as her support to education and health programs. Also on her post on the social media X, she highlighted her support to agricultural producers and her concern for the budget of the University of Agriculture. Finally, Moncada thanked current President Xiomara Castro for her legacy and pledged to move forward and with the Refoundation program with the support of the Honduran people. In Brazil, Independence Day is celebrated on September 7th, commemorating the moment when the country declared its independence from the Portuguese colonial empire in 1822. The commemorations of this special day and Brazil's role on the world stage, especially through cooperation with the emerging powers of the BRICS group, are fundamental to the country's national identity and geopolitical influence. Patriotic Day, as it is also known, is a public holiday in Brazil during which the country celebrates its freedom and cultural identity. In addition to the official ceremonies, cities throughout the country host various cultural events, concerts, folkloric dances, and fireworks, reflecting the diversity and pride of the Brazilian people. And in the context of the commemoration of Independence Day, Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva condemned those he described as traitors to the country on Saturday and affirmed that there will be no room for foreign interference during his administration. The president's message was delivered during an official radio and television address on the eve of Independence Day in the South American giant. His speech was a clear rejection of the sanctions imposed by President Donald Trump against Supreme Federal Court justices and ministers of his cabinet, a retaliatory measure for the criminal trial facing former President Jair Bolsonaro for the 2023 coup conspiracy. President Lula's speech also targeted Brazilian politicians who encouraged attacks against Brazil, which he considered unacceptable.
We are not, and will not be, a colony of anyone again. We are capable of governing and taking care of our land and our people, without interference from any foreign government. We maintain friendly relations with all countries, but we do not accept orders from anyone. It is inadmissible the role of some Brazilian politicians who encourage attacks against Brazil. They were elected to work for the Brazilian people, but they defend only their personal interests. They are traitors to the homeland. History will not forgive them.
We have a first break coming up. Remember, you can join us on TikTok at teleSUR English, where you'll find news in different formats, news updates, and much more. We'll be right back. Stay with us. In the United States, thousands of people gathered in Washington, D.C. to protest against the Trump administration's military occupation of the U.S. Capitol, as well as the systematic harassment of immigrants orchestrated by Immigration and Customs Enforcement. Protestants raised their voices against arbitrary arrests, the criminalization of immigration, and the authoritarian policies imposed by the government. They also demanded an end to raids, respect for human rights, and public policies that guarantee employment and decent housing for the most vulnerable sectors. It is worth noting that churches are ringing their bells in support of the protest that is taking place from Malcolm X Park to Liberty Square. In August, U.S. President Trump announced the deployment of federal agents and National Guard troops to confront what he described as a criminal wave. Since then, over 600 arrests have been made in the country. And in the United States, federal immigration authorities and ICE agents carried out another operation in a chocolate factory in northern New York. State Governor Kathy Hochul denounced that among those detained were parents of at least a dozen children who risked returning home from school to an empty house. The action, described as frightened by the owner of the company, resulted in the detention of between 50 and 60 workers, most of whom were of Latin origin. The presidents of Cuba and Laos described fraternal relations as a historic milestone during official talks. As part of the third stop in his tour of countries on the Asian continent, Cuban head of state Miguel Díaz-Canel and his Laotian counterpart Thongloun Sisoulith emphasized the importance of bilateral links and political dialogue between both nations. In the talks, the leaders reviewed the current situation in the fields of bilateral cooperation. The heads of state described as close and indestructible the bonds of brotherhood that unite the two peoples and recalled that the ties date back to the late 1960s. Meanwhile, in Vietnam, heavy rainfall has caused severe flooding and the collapse of several houses in Lam Dong province. According to official reports, emergency teams are helping villagers in the Hiep Ten commune to evacuate risk areas as soon as possible. The floods have affected one main road and 5 villages. At least 500 houses are affected. Some have completely collapsed and others present serious structural damage, while the number of flood victims is in the hundreds. And in India, authorities have confirmed the death of at least 90 people due to flooding in the areas of Uttarakhand, Punjab, Jammu, Kashmir and New Delhi. Also, authorities have ordered the evacuation of thousands of citizens who have been transferred to designated safe areas. In Afghanistan, search and rescue operations have concluded following the 6.0 earthquake that struck the country in August 31st, leaving 2,200 dead and 4,000 injured. Authorities emphasize that this was one of the worst tragedies the country has ever experienced, leaving entire communities destroyed. Among the most affected regions are Kunar, Nuristan and Lakman, which are facing a severe humanitarian crisis. It should be noted that civil protection teams set up camps for displaced families in several locations, and the organized distribution of primary and emergency humanitarian aid continues. And in Spain, a new forest fire, presumably intentional, forced the confinement of the population of the parish of Castromil, a locality between the provinces of Zamora and Orense. Firefighting and aerial teams of the regional government of Castilla and León were deployed to protect the homes and property of the inhabitants. Despite the seriousness of the situation, the rapid mobilization of 14 aerial resources was key to avoid major damage to the population and their properties. At present, firefighting efforts continue to be active to completely control this outbreak, which is not a reactivation of previous fires but a new event. This incident comes on top of an extraordinary month in which Spain experienced a 16-day heat wave described as the most severe in its history. We now have our second break coming up. Before we invite you to visit our Facebook page at teleSUR English, there you'll be able to watch our top stories, special live coverage, and much more. Follow our page and activate the notification button to stay up to date on the world's most recent events. A final break, don't go away. Welcome back. The number of people who have died of starvation rose to 382 amid the Israeli blockade of the Gaza Strip since October 2023. The Gaza Health Department has recorded 6 deaths from starvation and malnutrition in the last 24 hours, including 1 infant. As a result, the total number of deaths from starvation reached 382, of which 135 are children. At the same time, Israel is preventing thousands of food products from entering the territory, including vital items such as meat, fish, eggs, fruit and vegetables, as well as certain types of dairy products. Malnutrition caused by the Israeli blockade of the Palestinian coastal enclave currently affects 43,000 children under the age of 5 and more than 55,000 pregnant and breastfeeding women. On the other hand, in Gaza, at least 20,000 children have lost their lives at the hand of Israel since October 2023. In this regard, Palestinian authorities warn that on average, 1 child has been fatally wounded every hour. It's also estimated that another 132,000 could die of hunger if the airstrikes, ground operations and the blockade of humanitarian aid imposed by the Israeli army continues. It is important to note that the number of injured Palestinian children has reached 42,000 and that minors, compared to adults, are 7 times more likely to die from injuries caused by explosions. And thousands of people gathered in Tel Aviv, Israel, against the government of Benjamin Netanyahu and demanding the regime to stop the attacks on Gaza Strip and agree with Hamas resistance movement on the exchange of prisoners. Protesters accused the Israeli Prime Minister of indefinitely prolonging the conflict and the captivity of the hostages for political reasons while clinging to power. Israeli citizens fear that the new military authorities in Tel Aviv will risk the lives of their detained family members amidst the Zionist aggression that has killed more than 64,000 Palestinian civilians since October 7, 2023. And in Chile, social and political organizations demonstrated in front of La Moneda Palace on the International Day of Solidarity with Palestine. Participants demanded that the government end relations with the Zionist State of Israel. In this regard, lawyer Nelson Haddad is conducting a global campaign to collect nearly 100,000 signatures and call for Israel to be expelled from the United Nations. It's important to note that Chile is home to the largest community of Palestinian descendants outside the Middle East. And in the United Kingdom, authorities have arrested 425 people in London during protests in support of the Palestinian Action Group. At the protest, hundreds of civilians were targeted for rejecting the visit of Israeli President Isaac Herzog to London. They were demanding the government not to meet with Herzog while the massacre on the Gaza Strip continues. The arrests were made on charges of terrorism due to a ban on the Palestine Action Group by the British administration. London police reported the arrest of 300 people in similar rallies in support of Palestine. And on Sunday, Pope Leo XIV declared 15-year-old computer whiz Carlos Acutis the Catholic Church's first millennial saint. The leader of the Catholic Church held a ceremony in St. Peter's Square for more than 80,000 followers and to also canonize Pier Giorgio Frassati, a young Italian who died in 1925. During the religious event, Pope Leo XIV named Carlos Acutis as God's influencer. The Supreme Pontiff called on parishioners to work for His Holiness as these young men did. Solemn events and celebrations are expected to take place during the month of September, concluding on October 12th with a solemn mass presided over by Cardinal Pietro Parolin. And in Greece, a crowd of people gathered outside Parliament building to demand answers from the government about the Tempe train accident which occurred in 2023. The protest took place in Syntagma Square 1 week after the investigating judge decided to close the case after over 2 years of investigations. The accident occurred shortly before midnight on February 28, 2023, when a passenger train collided with a freight train on the line between Athens and Thessaloniki, claiming the lives of 57 people. The 9th edition of the Aviation Africa Summit and Exhibition was held in Kigali, capital of Rwanda, from September 4th to the 5th, boasting more exploration on China-Africa cooperation in low-altitude economy. Under the theme of collaborating to unlock Africa's growth, how can Africa deliver a sustainable aviation industry? The event attracted 1,700 aviation industry professionals as well as more than 100 companies that showcased their cutting-edge products. The EH216/S, a groundbreaking pilotless passenger-carrying aerial vehicle produced by Ehong, an urban air mobility technology platform company from China, was the centerpiece of the exhibition, with the witness of the Rwandan President Paul Kagame and Chinese representative. The aircraft made its maiden flight in Africa. In Nepal, thousands of devotees gather at Kathmandu Durbar Square to celebrate the month-long festival season, beginning with a parade for the living goddess Kumari. The week-long Indra Yatra festival is the first of many other coming celebrations in the predominantly Hindu nation, which include Dasain, the main festival celebrated later this month, and Tihar or Diwali, the festival of lights, in October. Tens of thousands line up the narrow streets of inner Kathmandu to worship Kumari, or Virgin, in the Nepali language, including Nepal's president, prime minister, and several top officials. The Indra Yatra festival marks the end of the monsoon and rice farming season, signaling the dawn of fall. Like this, we have come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. So join us on social media: Facebook, X, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For TeleSUR English, I'm Luis Alberto Matos. Thanks for watching.